Hey guys, chapter 35 coming at you. Yeah, sorry, I thought I had made this and posted it, but I guess left off my list. So let's get to it. We're talking about nationalism, identities in some of these places, in between the wars. What does that look like? We got colonialism going on for quite a long time, and we get a couple generations of people who become educated and want to do something different. So we're going to see what that looks like for people. So what did India do to gain independence? We're going to talk about Mohandas Gandhi and his efforts through the Indian National Congress to gain independence for India. We're going to see what's going on in China and how life in China is changing dramatically, and what does Japan have to do with it. And then, of course, the mobilization efforts and how that affects African colonies. Remember, all of Africa, with the exception of Ethiopia and Liberia, were all colonized by European powers who virtually all of them, with the exception of maybe Portugal, was at war just a couple of years ago. So we're going to see, what that looks like post-war, and then of course FDR's good neighbor policy and why it was necessary to um, intervene in a lot of politics in Latin American countries. So let's go over to India. The Indian National Congress was founded. Remember, Hindus can't practice violence. And so, even though they outnumbered the British colonizers probably 100 to 1, they can't start shooting at people because they practice non-aggression, non-violence. And so what we see is originally collaboration with the British, serving in the military, etc., as a means of gaining some individual social responsibility, etc. But then after the war, once you realize they came home and it was the same old stuff, you can see there's a lot of opposition to that. They encouraged development of a Muslim League. They wanted to kind of counteract the Indian National Congress in order to keep the Muslims and the Hindus fighting with each other instead of them. And of course, a lot of people inspired a lot of that. So here's Gandhi, studied law in London, practiced in South Africa for a long time, all British colonies. And he was definitely opposed to segregation, especially in South Africa through apartheid, etc. And he really got involved when he returned to Indian National Congress. And he wanted to end the caste system and just make India a modern republic, which eventually would happen, but it's not going to happen until 1947. So, of course, he is also a Hindu, practicing ahimsa, the nonviolence, and wanted to do a lot of passive resistance. Let's have a sit-in. Let's get 10,000 people just to sit down in the middle of the city and just halt traffic and just show the Brits that they can't just do whatever they want to do. A lot of non-cooperation, civil disobedience. They're just going to stop playing the game. And a lot of boycotts. Anything British, they're just boycotting. British stores, British buses, British taxi cabs, you name it. Anything British, don't walk. They'll buy their groceries on the other side of town to support Indian businesses. And then, of course, there's a showdown between protesters and authorities where a lot of Indian people ended up getting killed in the Amritsar massacre. The India Act in 37, what we see is a lot of movement towards independence, but the 150 to 200 million Muslims are just like, you know what, we don't want to live in a Hindu country and vice versa. And so what do you do with that? So Muhammad al-Jinnah, he proposed this partition of creating the state. Eventually it's going to be known as Pakistan and East Pakistan. And that's really what they did when they got independence. They said, okay, you got 6 months. You want to be Muslim and live in Pakistan, go for it. You can feel free to move, Hindus, etc. But if you stick around, then don't complain when the laws don't jive with um, your religious beliefs. Let's move over to China. The last Qing emperor, Puyi, abdicates in 1911. He was like 2 years old. And what we see is the first leader really to emerge is this guy, Sun Yat-sen, who wanted to create a Chinese republic. And he was well on his way. But because so many people in China really didn't understand what that meant and how that was going to work, after 3,000 years of emperors of one group or another, it really didn't gain as much strength as he thought. And then, of course, when communism moves in the early 1920s, his movement's going to lose a lot of steam. You get a lot of political anarchy. different groups of different people. China is not as developed as a lot of parts of the world, and so news travels pretty slow. And you get some local leaders who pretty much lead and take over operations in a lot of these places. You get May the 4th movement, a lot of people protesting foreign interference. They don't want anybody in their country. It goes all the way back to echoes of the Boxer Rebellion, etc. But the big one was the Japanese. They wanted the Japanese out, and the Japanese had far too much control over what's going on. Japanese pounced on all the German territory, all the German spheres of influence that Germany lost after World War One, and the Japanese were quick to jump in and take over those operations, but didn't stop there. And then we get communism coming in 1921, led by a guy by the name of Mao Zedong, and he's going to eventually become the communist leader in 1948, and is going to serve all the way to he died in 76. So here's that Sun Yat-sen. He did accept some support from the Soviet Union early on, but what we see is, his real true ambition was to turn China into a republic, um, and created the National People's Party. However, that movement's going to be overshadowed by Mao's attempt to make China communist. Then you get this guy, Chiang Kai-shek. He's going to kind of take over this republic movement from Sun Yat-sen, and him and Mao are going to go at it all the way through the 30s. It's going to get put on hold during World War II and pick up right again after World War II. And eventually, Mao is going to gain more support of the local people and the little guy, uh, and uh, and communism is going to take hold with the support of the Soviet Union. And he's eventually going to kick out Chiang Kai-shek over to Taiwan, where that movement is going to continue to exist even today. And by 48, China goes full communist. And you can see kind of follow the track of where Mao and Chiang Kai-shek are doing and who's got what. You can see, look at the enormous Japanese influence in this part of the world. And that influence by the middle of World War II is going to get all the way down into big parts of China, some big cities, etc. Let's move over to Japan. Treaties under the League of Nations, they wanted to limit imperialist activity of Japan, but Japan doesn't really stop. There's a little bit of chaos here and there, and Japan becomes quite militaristic, building up huge military, really because if Japan wanted to expand like these colonial powers are doing in around the Pacific, there's really nobody to stop them. China's not in any position, or Russia, or the Philippines, or Southeast Asia, or anybody. There's nobody there to stop them if they want to. And so they keep going. And eventually they're going to be under the leadership of their Prime Minister Tojo, who's going to get them involved in World War II by attacking Pearl Harbor and all that. So they go after China because China has enormous amounts of resources, and Japan needs food. Only 11% of Japan is arable. And they need a quick, easy, cheap source of food product that they can export real quick to their own country. And so China was easy to get in there and easy to control, and a lot of resources. And so Japan's going to continue to push their way across northern China all the way up into World War II. There's a little bit of an incident in Manchuria. They blew up their own rail line, blamed the Chinese for it, giving them an excuse to go in and take over using this. And of course, they're going to get censured by the League of Nations. So they just quit the League of Nations. And really, the League of Nations didn't have much for teeth anyway. There's not much the League of Nations could do about it, especially without the support of the Americans. America never joined because of the squabble between the Republicans in the Senate and the president. Let's move on over to Africa. Of course, a lot of colonies participated in the war, supporting their colonial host. And once the Allies took over the German colonies in Africa, most notably Cameroon, Tanzania, and Namibia, then it was kind of a scramble who's going to get those. And really, Britain wanted the biggest one they wanted was Tanzania. They could deal without Cameroon, could deal without Namibia. They wanted Tanzania so that they could build a rail line all the way from Cairo all the way to Cape Town, all the way through. And the only thing holding them back was they couldn't build it through the jungles of Congo, and they had to go through Tanzania, and Germany wouldn't let them do it. But now they can. They can build that rail line all the way through. So a lot of Africans, of course, are encouraged to fight and a lot of times these soldiers are put right up on the front, et cetera, et cetera. And by the time these guys come back, we see a lot of challenges to European domination. They're like, you're fighting against tyrannical rule of these guys, but then we come home and we see tyrannical rule right here in our own home country. So what gives? And so we see some changes. But here's what happens when you allow people to be educated. Pretty soon they get smarter than you, and they come back to their country after being educated in different Western institutions, and they say, "Wow, you people suck," and I want to lead this country out of this colonial era and put the power in the hands of the people again. And guys like Jomo Kenyatta did things like that, and Gandhi in India, and a few other people. We start to see people really going after this idea of colonialism, especially in Africa, and really hasten the coming of a lot of independence movements. Marcus Garvey, he was this Jamaican guy living in the United States. Eventually got kicked out of the U.S. because he didn't pay any taxes for a long time. But he promoted this back to Africa movement. If you don't like it here, if you're being discriminated against, go back to Africa. And thousands of people did. Went back to Africa. I don't know how they ever fared, but a lot of people did. In Latin America, what we see is a lot of U.S. influence because of the good neighbor policy. Anything goes down in Latin America, the United States is going to take care of it. It's our backyard, we'll take care of it. Really, they didn't want European ideologies affecting the governments of Latin America. They wanted to take control themselves to make sure things happen the right way and to keep American business interests safe in these countries. The United States got involved in a lot of places, you'll see on the map. But some of the big ones were United States over involvement really kind of pushed some countries the other way, especially in Venezuela, in Cuba, in Haiti, Dominican Republic for a long time. We start to see a lot of resentment toward the United States getting their nose in business where it doesn't belong. Of course, the United States comes out of the war looking great. The economy is looking good. United States, lost a lot of troops, but for the most part, damage was done on other continents. And so the United States looks great after this war and makes a lot of investments in Latin America for raw materials, et cetera. And under Taft's dollar diplomacy before the war, we start to see a lot of American businessmen and companies and women making a whole lot of money in a lot of parts of Latin America, especially. So you can read the map here and see where the United States got involved just around the Caribbean and northern Latin America quite extensively for a long time. So Roosevelt comes up with this policy that says, we're going to support local leaders that support the United States. We don't care if it's necessarily in the best interest of the people there. We want to make sure that they stick to um, their policy of putting the United States interest and the business interest above their own, and that's what we care about. So Marines will go in and train a lot of the militias to make sure that the status quo doesn't change. In Mexico too, Cardenas nationalizes the oil industry in '38, and that really shook up a lot of things. The United States kind of saw that coming. And what we see is going to try to compensate some of these investors in Mexico, but it really didn't do that so much because the United States needed a lot of Mexicans during the war to come in and take industry jobs. So, so what did India do? Really, non-passive or passive resistance. Just they stopped playing the game and boycotts and protests, etc., to make it so the British just wanted to leave. We can't fight them out, so we'll just make it so sour that they'll just back up and leave. And they did eventually. So we know that political climate, we got Mao versus Chiang Kai-shek, communism versus republic, and eventually Chiang Kai-shek's going to lose. Japan rolls in the chaos and takes over huge chunks. And how did it affect political climates? Well, people got mad and said, we want independence. I don't blame them for one bit. And then the good neighbor policies, FDR trying to control Latin American policies to protect American interests and to keep European ideologies out of Latin America. So that's pretty much it. Short chapter. We'll see you all in 36 later.